A wife, feeling neglected by her husband, found herself seeking attention elsewhere. She had been unhappy for some time, feeling that her husband's work had taken priority over their relationship. One evening, while he was away on a business trip, she met someone new, someone who listened to her, made her feel special, and gave her the attention she craved. As days went by, the affair became a regular part of her life, each meeting fueling her sense of excitement and freedom. What she didn't know, however, was that her daughter, who was growing up too fast, had begun to notice the strange behavior in her mother. She noticed the late-night phone calls, the secretive looks, and the way her mother would smile absent-mindedly, as if lost in a world where only she existed. The daughter, in her curiosity, started following her mother, trying to piece together the changes in her actions. Eventually, she overheard a conversation that revealed everything. Her mother was cheating. The realization hit her hard, but she chose to keep quiet, unsure of what to do. Her conflicted feelings left her questioning everything she thought she knew about love and trust. The wife, oblivious to her daughter's discovery, continued her double life. She felt exhilarated by the affair, but guilt began to seep in slowly, especially as her daughter's behavior became more distant. The once warm home began to feel cold, with an invisible tension hanging in the air. In the end, the daughter's silence became a reflection of the complicated emotions she couldn't share with her mother, and the wife's affair remained hidden, creating a fracture in their family that would take time to heal. As time went on, the tension in the house grew palpable. The daughter, burdened with the secret, found it harder to keep up the facade of normalcy. At school, she struggled with her grades, her thoughts constantly drifting back to the secret she carried. She began withdrawing from her friends, her once vibrant personality dulled by the weight of knowing something her father remained completely oblivious to. Meanwhile, the wife's affair deepened. The excitement and thrill she initially felt began to fade, replaced by a constant anxiety that gnawed at her. She began to wonder how long she could continue to juggle both lives, especially as her guilt grew stronger. She couldn't shake the feeling that her daughter was no longer the same, but she brushed it off, convinced that it was just a phase. Yet, every time their eyes met, she could sense the silent accusation in her daughter's gaze. It made her feel more isolated, but she couldn't bring herself to confront the truth. One evening, when her husband returned home unexpectedly early, the wife found herself caught in a web of lies she had spun too tightly. Her husband, sensing the distance between them, asked if something was wrong. His concern only seemed to push her further into silence. She wanted to confess, to tell him everything, but the fear of losing him, of shattering their family, paralyzed her. The daughter, on the other hand, had reached her breaking point. She could no longer sit back and watch her mother spiral deeper into deception. Her conflicting emotions finally led to a confrontation one afternoon when her father was away. She confronted her mother, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and hurt, demanding to know the truth. The wife, startled by her daughter's sudden confrontation, tried to deny everything, but the evidence was too clear. The daughter, with tears streaming down her face, expressed how betrayed she felt, not just by her mother's affair, but by the lies that had poisoned their home. It was then that the wife realized the deep pain her actions had caused, not just to her husband, but to her daughter as well. The guilt she had been running from hit her with full force. It was no longer just about the affair. It was about the family she was about to lose. The once comfortable life they had shared seemed shattered beyond repair. The wife knew she had to make a choice. Either continue down the destructive path she had chosen or confront her mistakes and try to rebuild what she had torn apart. But the road ahead wasn't clear. Trust had been broken, and even with the best intentions, healing seemed impossible without first addressing the deep wounds she had inflicted. Both the wife and daughter faced a long, painful journey ahead, with the hope of rebuilding their relationship clouded by the shadows of what had been lost. The confrontation between the wife and daughter left a heavy silence in the house. The daughter, her heart racing from the emotional outburst, withdrew to her room, shutting herself off from the world. The wife, overwhelmed with guilt, sat frozen in the living room, replaying the conversation over and over in her head. She had never wanted to hurt her daughter, yet the damage had already been done. In the days that followed, the wife tried to initiate a conversation with her daughter, but the girl remained distant, avoiding eye contact and barely speaking. The bond between them, once so strong, seemed irreparably strained. The wife understood the pain she had caused, but she wasn't sure how to fix it. Every apology felt inadequate. Every attempt to explain herself fell flat. At the same time, the husband returned to his usual routine, unaware of the emotional turmoil brewing at home. His work continued to consume most of his time, and he began to notice the growing distance between him and his wife, though he couldn't quite pinpoint why things felt off. His wife seemed withdrawn, lost in thought, and she kept avoiding intimate moments. He asked her if she was okay, but she would always brush him off with a vague excuse. He knew something was wrong, but without evidence, he couldn't bring himself to confront her. Instead, he buried himself in his work, unwilling to face the possibility that his marriage might be on the brink of collapse. The wife, meanwhile, found herself at a crossroads. She tried to contact her lover, hoping for some sort of emotional support, but every message or call left her feeling emptier. She realized that the excitement she once found in the affair had turned into a hollow escape, and the guilt was beginning to outweigh any fleeting pleasure she experienced. The brief moments of passion and attention were nothing compared to the love and connection she had once shared with her husband, before everything became consumed by distance and neglect. One night, after a particularly silent dinner, the wife found herself alone in their bedroom, staring at the space where her husband used to sleep. She felt the weight of her choices pressing down on her chest, suffocating her. It was in this moment that she made a decision. She would end the affair. She had already lost her daughter's trust, and her marriage was on the brink of ruin. The only thing left to salvage was the family she had almost destroyed. The next day, she made the painful phone call to end things with her lover. It wasn't easy, but she knew it was the right thing to do. The affair had never been the solution to her unhappiness, just a temporary escape from a marriage that needed attention. The weight lifted from her shoulders slightly, but it was clear that the healing process would take time. She knew her daughter wouldn't forgive her overnight, and she wasn't sure if her marriage could ever fully recover, but she was willing to try. The following week, the wife sat down with her daughter once more. This time, there were no accusations or tears. Instead, she simply apologized for the lies, the betrayal, and the pain she had caused. She promised to do better, to be there for her daughter, and to rebuild their relationship from the ground up. The daughter, her eyes still filled with hurt, listened in silence. She wasn't ready to forgive her mother yet, but she knew something had changed. The woman sitting in front of her was no longer the same person who had been swept away by her own selfishness. There was a glimmer of remorse, of genuine desire to make things right. It would take time, months, maybe years. But they both understood that healing could only start if they were willing to face the truth, however painful it might be. For now, they were both left in the uncomfortable place of trying to figure out how to rebuild a fractured family, knowing that the road ahead would be long and uncertain. As for the husband, the truth still loomed on the horizon. The wife knew she would eventually have to tell him what had happened, but that conversation would be the hardest one yet. When the time came, she hoped he would understand that the affair had never been about love, but about her own fear and inadequacy. Whether he could ever forgive her, though, was still a question she couldn't answer. But for now, she focused on trying to rebuild trust with her daughter, knowing that it was the first step in weeks past, and while the wife and daughter began to tentatively rebuild their relationship, the husband remained oblivious to the full extent of the betrayal. The wife, still burdened with guilt, knew the truth would eventually come out. She continued to focus on mending things with her daughter, who, though scarred, began to slowly open up again, though the scars of betrayal remained. One evening, The husband returned home early again, noticing the quiet tension in the air. His instincts told him something was wrong, and he finally asked his wife what was truly going on. The weight of the moment hung heavy between them. The wife, with a heavy heart, confessed everything: the affair, the lies, the guilt. Her voice trembled as she spoke, each word feeling like a dagger to her own heart. The husband listened in stunned silence, the betrayal sinking in. His face went pale as he processed the truth. The air between them thickened, and the wife knew this was the moment that would determine their future. Whether they could rebuild or whether the marriage would end was uncertain. But for the first time in months, she felt a fragile hope. Hope that with time, honesty, and effort, they could find a way to move forward, even if it meant starting over completely, reclaiming the life she had almost lost. The husband's silence stretched on, his shock evident in his eyes. Finally, he spoke, his voice low but steady. "I never saw it coming." The wife's heart sank as she saw the hurt in his gaze. The trust between them was shattered, but she could only apologize, knowing words might not be enough. The daughter, overhearing the conversation, stepped forward. She hadn't been ready to face the truth before, but now she saw her mother's vulnerability and the gravity of the situation. With hesitation, she spoke softly. "I know things have been broken, but maybe we can try to fix them together." The road ahead was uncertain, full of painful conversations and slow healing. But for the first time in a long while, the family began to communicate honestly, knowing that rebuilding trust would take time and effort from all sides. The future remained unclear, but the hope for reconciliation lingered, fragile but real.